It's certainly no secret that I love games where collecting is a big part of the action, be it digitally in a game like Pokemon or physically with collectible card games like, say, Yu-Gi-Oh! There's something that's really entertaining about a game that gives you the opportunity to explore and build a collection of stuff that is unique to you and you alone. What's really fun about games like this is how every player can have their own experience with the game. Every Pokemon is someone's favorite Pokemon. Every archetype of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards is someone's favorite archetype. Now the thing is, Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Were, technically speaking, a little bit before my time. I was born in 1998, which means that Pokemon had been out in Japan for 2 years already, and it came to the States later that year. The first Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards came out in 2001, when I was all of 3 years old, so, they're just a wee bit under that 6 and up range suggested by Konami. Now, I could still get into these series because they had a lot of staying power. Pokemon was on their 3rd generation of successes by the time I hit elementary school, with absolutely zero sign of slowing down, and by the time I was old enough to properly understand the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, Konami was still experimenting with new ways of playing the game. They were adding things like Synchro and Xyz summoning. But they weren't the only games that tried to occupy that Japanese collectible game niche. Things like Duel Masters, Digimon, and Cardfight Vanguard all tried to get themselves a piece of that sweet playground phenomenon pie. However, the one that actually succeeded in capturing my attention as a child was Bakugan. Bakugan was a toy line and anime series created by Spin Master and Sega's Toy Division, which is honestly not something I ever actually knew existed.
What's up, Shadow?
Not you again.
The whole basic point of Bakugan is that you have these little plastic balls, and they all have a magnet in the bottom of them. As you can see, I still have many of my own from back in the day. Nerd! When the magnet engages, the ball pops open and reveals it was actually a little tiny creature the whole time. It's kind of like if Pokeballs were actual Pokemon instead of just devices that contain them. I wanted to look up the production history of the toys to see if I could figure out when and how and why and where they came from, and actually found some kind of interesting things. The toys first premiered in 2007 to coincide with the Japanese release of the anime series, but who made them is where it gets kind of funny. According to the Bakugan wiki, which I'm going to have to trust at least a little on some of these facts, the toys were first invented by an American named Aldrich Saucier. When I went to look the man up to see if he worked on anything else I might be familiar with, the top spots on Google were 1. The Bakugan wiki entry for him, 2. A LinkedIn page with no profile picture that might be him, as it lists inventing Bakugan under his work experience, and 3. A Wikipedia article for a scientist who worked on the Strategic Defense Initiative, the space-based particle beam missile defense system, more commonly known as the Star Wars program, which was created by United States President Ronald Reagan before this Aldrich Saucier the scientist was eventually fired for whistleblowing about alleged mismanagement and abuse. Now I can only assume that these are two different people with the same extremely unique name, seeing as the scientist died in 2016 at the age of 80 and has no conceivable connection with the same company that made Sonic the Hedgehog. Meanwhile, the LinkedIn article shows that the Bakugan Aldrich retired in 2022 and is hopefully still alive. I just found this whole crazy coincidence funny enough to mention. Back in the realm of games made for children, Bakugan was kind of an odd game compared to its contemporaries. Seeing as it was all about these little balls that became creatures, the game essentially played like what I can only describe as complicated anime marbles. The Bakugan were shipped with these thick cards with metal plates inside them called gate cards, and the players would take turns rolling their Bakugan towards the cards, hoping desperately that the magnet will align just right and the Bakugan will stick to the card. When two different players' Bakugan stick to the same card, you flip the gate card, apply whatever effects are required, add up power bonuses to your Bakugan's base G-power rating, play any additional ability cards you might want, and at the end of it all, the Bakugan with the higher power number wins. Once you win 3 gate cards, you win the match. Getting the roles just right is still hard, even for an adult like me, and the strategy of the game, at least with the early release cards that I have left over from my childhood, leaves a lot to be desired. The high skill floor and low strategy ceiling meant that I'm not surprised the game side of things never completely took off. It likely wouldn't have even survived as long as it did without some kind of marketing edge, something to, get the kids all hyped up about buying the toys. Luckily, they were able to find one.
Two worlds collide on the inside. You gotta fight for what's right before it's gone, gone. This is Bakugan.
Bakugan Battle Brawlers anime. Maybe creating an anime aimed at young boys in the 8 to 12 age range is shamelessly ripping off the strategy of your competitors, but I gotta admit, it sure did work for me. I mean, as you can see, I still have a bunch of my old Bakugan from when I was a kid. I was actually finding these in the box of my old stuff that made me want to make the video to begin with.
My name is Dan, and together with my friends Runo, Marucho, Julie, not to mention Mr. Hotshot himself, Shun, and Alice, we are the Bakugan Battle Brawlers! Bakugan, one goal, two worlds.
Rewatching the anime after all these years really worked me back to the past, in a really good way. You can accuse me of nostalgia bias all you want, but I can see why this show hooked me as a kid. Inventive lore, awesome creatures, and being based on a collectible game that I can play myself, thus giving me the ability to project myself into the same world as the characters on the screen, that's all the reasons I got hooked on Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't have the artistic knowledge to really nail it down into words, but there's something with the design of the creatures in this show that I really like. They feel complicated, but not to a crazy degree. The style really stands out in a way that I just don't have the method to describe. Unfortunately, the show isn't without its flaws. The world building is kind of inconsistent, and the pacing gets pretty weird at some places. There's not enough time to flesh out some of the more interesting characters, but there's still time to dedicate whole episodes to throwaway goons of the week. I think the two worst problems the show has are with the game itself and how it's depicted. For one thing, they heavily rely on the partner Bakugan. It doesn't take long to realize the pattern to most of the battles. The heroes will throw in two Bakugan who will likely get squashed, putting the hero up against the wall. Then they'll throw in their ace Bakugan who will sweep the competition. The other problem it has is that it doesn't actually follow the rules of the game very well. Characters will throw down way more ability cards than the 3 allotted in the game rules, and they pull new powers and moves out of absolutely nowhere sometimes. It essentially turns the whole show into the Duelist Kingdom arc from Yu-Gi-Oh!, which was written before the game had codified rules. It's really hard to get into the game side of the show when the characters in the show are playing a far more complex and more interesting version of the game than I can play in real life. That said, the show isn't without its merits. As stated earlier, I find most of the character and creature designs really cool and memorable, and the plot does some really interesting character work at stages. The twist reveal of Masquerade's true identity is still really great after all these years. It's one of those things that you just don't think you could ever have seen coming until you go back and review and you see that it makes perfect sense. But we're not here just to talk about the show or the physical game. Much like battling in Pokemon and dueling in Yu-Gi-Oh!, Bakugan brawling is best enjoyed when you have someone to play it with. And seeing as it's highly unlikely I'm going to find a Bakugan night at my local game store, I'm going to have to play me some Bakugan the only other way I know how. With a video game. Bakugan Battle Brawlers, the game! Before we go any further, I'd like to point out the cover art. It's the same across all versions of the game, and it has one glaring oddity. Can you spot it? You've got characters in the show doing what I can only assume is tossing their Bakugan out, but none of these are actual Bakugan. They're just weird spheres with lines on them. Could they not just have copied and pasted art from the show showing their Bakugan in ball form? Putting cover art aside, this game first came out in October of 2009 for the Xbox 360, PS2, PS3, Nintendo DS, and Nintendo Wii. That's a lot of consoles. Honestly, there's not a ton of distinction I could find between versions, outside of some fairly minor gameplay and large graphical differences, so you probably don't need to worry that much about which console you get the game for. I mean, mostly. You want to know the weirdest thing about the game, though? It never came out in Japan. Despite being based on a Japanese anime that in turn was based on a toy line that was made in part by a Japanese company, the Bakugan Battle Brawlers game just didn't make it to the land of the rising sun. It wasn't even made by Sega, despite them working on the toys. It was made by Now Production, who worked on a ton of third-party games, most notably, to me at least, are the Katamari Damacy, the Mario baseball games, and 2 Sonic games, Sonic Riders and the GameCube port of Sonic Adventure DX. Publishing this game was none other than Activision. The game starts out pretty simply. We make a character and we get a pick between one of the 6 Bakugan attributes. I chose Darkest because that sounds pretty cool. The actual story starts with a scene of all the bad guys hanging out in this void space while Hal G, the main human antagonist of the first season, talks about how he's created this super sweet, evil-looking orb. Then, we immediately cut to Bakugan the Doom Dimension. A bunch of lights come out of these dead Bakugan and they coalesce in this weird dragon thing that flies off. I don't know, who knows what that could be about. In the real world, our story actually starts with our player character getting harassed by the local bully. He wants to battle us in Bakugan, but we don't actually know how to play the game. Luckily, shonen protagonist McAnime Boy Dan Kuso is here to give us a tutorial. The game plays a lot like the physical game with 2 major differences. For starters, you have a lot more control over your Bakugan's movements than you do in the physical game. After selecting your angle attack and whether you want to do a normal or power throw, you launch your Bakugan. While the Bakugan has momentum, you actually have some control over how it moves. You can expend some of the energy to manipulate the Bakugan with the Wii's motion controls. It controls about as well as you'd expect from a Wii game. It's not bad by any means, but it does kind of feel wonky if you're trying to do anything too precise. Instead of that liminal void space that the characters battled in the show, the game features a number of special arenas that have a bunch of stage hazards and bonus items to collect. Most commonly you can find G-Power upgrades, but you also get batteries that extend your control time, ability cards that can mess with your opponent's throws, and these crystals that contain special abilities you can activate during battles. While the Wii controls leave something to be desired, I actually like this from a conceptual standpoint. At the very least, it rewards skill and thinking about where you want to throw your Bakugan, which is a good thing to incentivize. The second big gameplay difference is what I consider this game's greatest issue: the minigames. Once you and an opponent land on the same card, you will go through the same steps as the physical game. The gate card will open, effects will be applied, you can drop any ability cards you want to play. After that, there's one more step though. Depending on the type of gate card you land on, you have to play one of a few different varieties of minigame. And you do have to play them. As you score points in the minigame, your G-Power will increase. And since the AI is playing, you're playing. Since I'm playing the Wii version, I have 3 minigames, each with 3 different skill levels. There's a rhythm game section, a shooting gallery, and of course, the obligatory Shake the Wiimote game. Honestly, none of them are really that interesting, even on higher skill levels. And you'll get intimately familiar with these games, as you have to play one during every single fight. The thing I hate about the minigames is that it takes away from all the great things the rest of the game has to offer. Did you think through your strategy, carefully pairing your gate cards and Bakugan? Timing your ability cards so you don't overextend but still have enough power to win? Too bad, if you don't wiggle this Wii remote, you will lose! Did you master the Wii controls and learn the layout of the stages to find items to power up your Bakugan? Too bad! Play the world's worst version of Dance Dance Revolution or you will lose! Because of the minigames, the Bakugan video game stops being about skill and strategy and is reduced down to a poor man's Mario Party battle. You might think you can parlay the minigames into an advantage for yourself, but it's also fairly unlikely. You can theoretically turn a loss into a win by doing well in the minigame, but in my experience, that only ever happened if it was already a very close game. If there was really any large discrepancy in G-Power, it was usually more work than it was ever worth to even try once the minigame started. Also, as a side note, you can also win a gate card by landing 2 of your own Bakugan on the same gate card to perform a double stand. Or, if all your Bakugan are already on cards, you can pick one of your Bakugan to stand. If your opponent can't land on that Bakugan's card in the next turn, you'll win it automatically. I don't know if those were rules in the physical game, and I honestly couldn't find a rulebook old enough to check, so I figured I'd tack it on here at the end of this section. Let's check back in on the plot. After the tutorial fight, Dan tells us that we should consider entering an upcoming tournament. Our character says that there's no way he can really expect to win because he doesn't have a proper talking partner Bakugan. Anyway, about 5 minutes later, our character will be walking through the same park he was just in when there's a big flash of light and a Bakugan appears and starts talking to us.
If I battle with you, I'll have the chance to defeat other Bakugan?
Yeah, we'll beat them all!
Despite the fact that everything this Bakugan says is a ginormous red flag, our character will offer to team up with this Bakugan, whose name, by the way, is Leonidas. Leonidas is that weird dragon thing we saw earlier in the Doom dimension, and he always takes on the same attribute that we pick at the beginning, which is why he's darkest for me, but he can beat any of them. I actually think the game kind of wants you to pick Chaos, the light attribute, since the Leonidas specific cards not only give the biggest boost to Chaos Bakugan, but also literally depict Chaos Leonidas. Either way, once we beat the initial tournament, anime characters Marucho and Runo show up to basically throw a whole bunch of suspicion on Leonidas because, I don't know, a tiny plastic orb is definitely a cause for alarm without someone to actually use him in battle.
I'm with Marucho. Tigrera said there's something weird about how aggressive he is. Maybe you should find a different partner.
We naturally brush them off, and they swear to get to the bottom of the Leonidas mystery. That'll serve as the basis for most of the storyline. We enter a tournament, a member of the Battle Brawlers shows up to suspect us of villainy, and we brush them off and eventually take them out in a brawl. In between battles, we can do exhibition matches against opponents in the park, or check out the store, which is run by Alice, to buy new cards or Bakugan. I will admit that the game actually has a pretty good variety of Bakugan, and you can mix and match attributes to your heart's content. Or just roleplay an anime character and stick to one like I did. Most of the basic Bakugan from the first big chunk of the anime are available. I mean, you got Juggernoid, and Serpenoid, and Centipoid, and Domino Pizza's The Noid.
Whole Domino's Pizza! We avoid the Noid!
There are several Bakugan missing, but few of real note. I mean, aw man, I can't play High Noid? That's garbage! I'm gonna boycott this game. The missing Bakugan that I actually find notable are the ones they have cards for. Elcondo, Wormquake, Mantris, all these Bakugan appear on cards but aren't actually playable. Those don't really annoy me, at least very much, but one that actually does kind of annoy me is the 6 Soldiers of Destroya. Not only are they on cards, but they are mentioned twice during the plot, by name. And during the endgame portion, all the Brawlers have their evolved form Bakugan, so that means they've already met the 6 Soldiers. I mean, it's fine though, it's fine. I mean, it's not like I had a Subterra Clayf as a kid and it was my strongest Bakugan, which really endeared me to the character, so I really wanted to use him in the game. I mean, that would have been an absolutely ridiculous proposition. I'm sure it's fine. Back in Plotville, during the 3rd tournament of the game, we learned that a rogue player beat Dan and Drago in a brawl, and Julie will accuse us of being that rogue player. Luckily, when we beat the tournament, and Julie, our enemy will reveal itself, and it's this guy? His name is Marduk, and I don't know if this is a shading thing or a line work thing, but what is clearly supposed to be a mask looks like it's flush with his face, which makes him look more like he has a quarter of his skull exposed. Marduk has teamed up with an evil Bakugan named Gladiator because Lord Death Murder was a bit on the nose. Gladiator tries to recruit our Leonidas to be his general and serve him in his world domination cause, and Leonidas tells him in no unsimple terms to pound sand. and we have a little exhibition match.
Vladitor, I'm in a generous mood. I don't know who you are, but things will get ugly if you don't get out of my sight now!
After pounding him into the pavement, Vladitor reveals that Leonidas is actually from the Doom Dimension. Oh no! Vladitor knows this because he was previously banished to the Doom Dimension for eons, for reasons. Naturally, this leads to more suspicion from members of the Brawlers, but we're not Dimension racists, so we don't care that much that our partners from an eldritch plane of darkness where a defeated Bakugan go. That's more or less the entire plot spelled out. After this, Marduk and Vladitor will team up with Algae and Masquerade, the antagonists from the show, while we will partner with the heroes. We have a few more tournaments culminating us being named an official member of the Bakugan Battle Brawlers. Marduk and Vladitor, meanwhile, are promised the Silent Orb from the beginning of the game if they can beat us. Before the final tournament, the Ultimate Battle Tournament, Marduk and Vladitor call us out for a final showdown, which obviously we need to win, because if we don't, I don't know, really. I mean, they'll rule the world? The game says the fate of all Bakugan is in our hands, but they don't really explain what that means.
You said it! The fate of all Bakugan is in our hands!
When we beat Marduk in the tournament, Hal G shows up to reprimand him. Vladitor gets all huffy and swipes the Silent Orb anyway. This causes him to evolve and become Battle Axe Vladitor. Yes, I can definitely see how they got that name. Vladitor warps us all to the Doom Dimension, which starts sucking power from all the Brawlers Bakugan, except for us, because this is Leonidas' hometown. The protagonist Bakugan give us their Spirit Bomb energy, and we too evolve into Omega Leonidas, which has all the edge we need for the final showdown. I'll admit, I find this pretty nice, at least from a narrative perspective. We are limited to only Omega Leonidas in this fight, which means that we have to battle Vladitor 3 times in a row to win. It does feel very dramatic, other than the minigames. Upon defeating Battle Axe Vladitor, both Bakugan will begin to fade away. Marduk doesn't take this very well, but we do get a heartfelt goodbye to our partner Leonidas, and we get to chastise our bully for not being able to take the death of his only friend in this world in a stoic manner.
You can't just leave me here!
Vladitor may have been evil, but at least he had pride.
We mourn our fallen comrade, but hold our head high because his loss was not in vain, and we'll always have the memories. Anyway, about 5 minutes later, our character will be walking through the same park from the beginning of the game when there's a big flashlight and a Bakugan appears. It's Leonidas, back from the grave. Yeah, apparently Vladitor gave Leonidas the last bit of his energy so he could stick around as a sign of respect to a worthy opponent, I think? I mean, I don't know. At this point, I'm just kind of glad the credits are starting to roll and I don't have to play any more mini-games. That is pretty much the game in its entirety. After this, there are some post-game tournaments you can participate in, and you can battle any character in the park at will. Beating them will give you the opportunity to buy their signature Bakugan in the store. I'll admit, this was kind of fun to play around with. They all have what I like to call legally distinct features, so the game can pretend that having 2 Dragos doesn't break the lore. Also, all the signature Bakugan, including Leonidas, have special ability cards that change their attack animation if you win the battle. And it was really fun to try and use as many as I could just to see all the varieties. But now that everything is said and done, how does the game actually rank? It does so many things well. It has the same fun character and creature designs as the show. It makes the game more accessible so you aren't trying to play complicated anime marbles IRL. I mean, there's a lot to love about the game. Unfortunately, enjoying all the fun stuff also means dealing with all the flaws, like the minigames and the occasionally wonky controls. In this way, the game is actually a pretty good encapsulation of the Bakugan franchise. The whole thing was inventive, original, and it managed to scratch the same itch as many of its competitors without feeling like a shameless ripoff. But it also never managed to get its feet out from under it and grow past its awkward beginnings. It kept trying to reinvent itself and add on new layers and concepts without giving us time to really take any of it in and grow to care and love it. honestly, if you are a fan of the show or the physical game as a kid, I'd recommend giving the video game a try. At least for the novelty of it. If you aren't, it's definitely a lot harder to recommend. If you really want to experience more of the Bakugan franchise though, you can watch the whole anime on YouTube. It's not even on an official Bakugan channel. You can find the entire thing posted by just random fans, like it's YouTube circa 2009, complete with old television banner ads too. It's either going to be the kind of thing you're instantly hooked on, or you're never going to be able to look past the poorly thought out world building and nonsensical gameplay. There's really no in between here. And hey, if you like it, then you can check out the game. Give that a play. And again, call it nostalgia blindness. It was really fun to come back to this franchise after all this time away. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm Landon, this is Landon-Core. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!